Hello, my name is Host Eric, and welcome to Talking with Famous People. Tonight I want to share with you a story of going to see a band play with my friend David. It was one of my oldest friends, probably my very oldest friend, I think I could fairly say. I met him when I was 3 years old. He was 4 years older than I, 7 years old at the time. But despite being 4 years older than I, he and I always got along very well, and we were friends all through my childhood. And obviously he had a bit of a leadership role in some sense in my upbringing. He focused a lot on values, and he did a lot in terms of teaching me the importance of prioritizing values, which I appreciate. Anyhow, however, one of the reasons why I think that we were able to get along so well and be friends, even though there was a bit of a big age difference for little kids, right? A big age difference. 4 years is huge, but we were friends anyway. I mean, like, good friends. Like, one of my best friends for all my childhood, even though he was 4 years older than me. So, and not like really in an older brother-y kind of way, like in a peer way. Anyway, I'm struck by this because I've read in Socionics about how ISTJs, and I'm pretty sure Dave is an ISTJ, has this Cameron, that the ISTJ and the ENTP tend to have it describes the relationship between the two types as supervisorial, or like hierarchical, that one of them will be the lead person and one of them will be the subordinate person in the relationship in some sense. They'll both be comfortable in those positions. It's weird because I definitely sort of have that kind of relationship with Cameron. I mean, he does work for me, I guess, but I mean, he was my friend before he worked for me, and even then it was kind of that way, and I'm not happy with that. Don't get me wrong. But I'm a lot less unhappy with it than I might have been had I not understood this through a personality perspective model, because I realized that we're both expressing our personalities as they are, and that in coordination with one another, that's how they manifest. And it's naturally going to be so because we're leading with NE, they're leading with SI. They're going to be looking for that which is familiar, as like guides to what to do in any given situation. And they're not going to be necessarily the initiator of new ideas, right? Of new stuff to try. So if I'm going to be friends with them, and I'm so interested in trying new stuff, doing interesting new things and whatever, then it would make sense that I would be taking the lead a lot in regards to like what we're doing, I guess. If one were to conclude that I found the relationship fulfilling, because I'm probably not going to find the relationship fulfilling if we're spending a lot of time repeating things we've done before. They have any in the fourth slot, so on some level, for them hanging around with me is kind of like me hanging around with them. I find their general orderliness comforting, because it's like, oh, somebody is here who can do SI, basically. And I think they probably on some level find the complete lack of need to to do the exploration part in the company of an ENTP to be relaxing or burden lifting in some sense. Obviously, any generalizes, I think, more to a one-on-one relationship than does SI. So while he may have great SI, that doesn't mean he's going to be like want to deal with my scheduling for fun or something like that. You know, I mean, his own good SI doesn't translate well to shared activities, right? In the way that NE probably does. So I was struck by that today. Now, the second friend, Dave Porter, you know, Dave, who is the guitarist in my band, I would not say that our relationship is, I would not affirm, I affirm much less comfortably and happily or willingly to the fact that our relationship is a little bit like that too. And it is a little bit like that too. And you know, but I'm still learning key lessons from him. Even though I may be in a drive the bus sort of position in terms of like what we're doing, what we're talking about, etc. But you know, Dave's got that wise sort of. This is why I think he might be FI, but I guess FI. Yeah, he's got FI. FI where, in the third slot? Yeah, okay, that makes sense. So he's got FI, he's got TE, and yeah, it makes sense then. He's so value oriented. Like, at first when we started talking, I was dominating the conversation too much, as is my want sometimes. But I'm attentive to it. I really make an effort to listen and ask questions. What happened tonight in the conversation was what happens a lot. If I have sufficient time with somebody, I might do that in a burst at the beginning of the time we have to chat. But then once I get out a bunch of initial shit, then I'll go, whoa, Eric, what are you doing? You've been talking for a long time. It's hard. It's really hard to manage it perfectly. Tonight what happened is he started telling me about his job. I picked up on something he said and went off on some tangent, right? And then later on he said, he mentioned something about his job and how I didn't spend much time talking with him about it, or something along those lines. You know, not in exactly those words, but that was the gist of it. And and then we did talk about it, you know. And then I asked about it at some length. I asked quite a few questions, listened for a long time. I mean, at that point, that initial misstep on my part, I remedied it, and you know, I would say that that behavior was fully addressed once I slowed down enough to sort of contextualize things in a bigger picture, you know. So I mean, this is one of those little kind of personal problem things that just goes along, I think, with being an ENTP that I have wrestled with my whole life. I keep getting better and better and better at it, frankly. I still make little mistakes like tonight that are cued to me, like Dave cued to me fairly directly, but, you know, kindly, obviously, not intending to hurt my feelings or anything. I think just expressing maybe his own feelings of, hey, which are understandable. So, I appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate being able to metacognate more about that. I'd like to get it perfect. That's what I'd like to do. It's going to be hard. That requires a lot of sculpting. But, to the extent that one sculpts for achieving social equity, and I don't mean equality, I mean fairness, social fairness, so to speak. But equity is the best word for it. The opposite of inequity. Anyhow, I think that to the extent that one modifies one behavior for that purpose, it's almost always good. And I think it doesn't constitute either being fake or pandering or manipulating or any of those other negative words that people use to describe constructed behavior as opposed to naturally occurring behavior. And I think that's quite an interesting distinction in and of itself. To the extent that my behavior is constructed, isn't that a natural occurrence of my current psychological status, so to speak, where I am at the moment, and how that fits in with the larger picture, larger narrative of where I've been before, where I'm going, and what it means to be me from a meta perspective, as well as what it means to be me from an experiential perspective. So, let me gather my thoughts here for a second. Let me pause, gather. Okay, so I do generally find myself in a kind of, certainly David and I are, and as our cameraman, 100% equals in every meaningful sense of the word. But it's just one party tends to be more directive than the other when there's directiveness required. And I tend to be engaged with people and activities a lot. So I'm going to be more directive than most. If you measure directiveness as percentage of the total time spent with another person in which directions are being given. So, and that's the best way to measure it. I still go out and hang out with David more often than many and just go have coffee or something, or go have a meal, and we chat about various things. I always am full of stories to tell, and I need to always remember to. And I'm always, when I do remember, and I am attentive, which is the majority of the time nowadays with most people, when I do remember and am attentive to asking more questions, listening to what people have to say, thinking about it, responding meaningfully, I'm very glad I did consistently. It always prompts way more interesting thoughts in my own head about my own stuff than less stuff to react against or respond to. It's funny that I say react against as the default. Agree with could be the default. Okay, so then on to this. To conclude the supervisorial relationship, I think when it's entirely healthy, that's entirely misleading name for it. However, I think there's going to be a lead-follow relationship to a certain extent with the ENTP and the ISTJ, if only because the ENTP wants to go places and do shit, and has lots and lots of intuitive ideas about where to go and what to do and how to get there and how it's going to be mixed in with these other things and shit like that, And the ISTJ fundamentally wants to do, or goes about life referencing the familiar, ordering objects that comprise oneself stuff around the desk, little shit like that. Being the craftsman, being the mechanic type. And finding extroverted intuition when called upon to use it, the exploration, improvisation function, frustrating and a little bit frightening. Both Cameron and David are people who want to have clear plans, know what they're doing, stuff like that. Like if you put them in a classroom, want clear lesson plans they can execute that are very directive. They don't want to be said, here you go, here's your class, do something with them, which is the only thing I'd ever want to be ever told if I were a sub. I was for a few years anyway, back in the day. I much preferred not having lesson plans. So that's the musings of the evening regarding the ISTJ and ENTP personality types and how they manifest in a supervisorial subordinate role according to Socionics, and how that's kind of true but misleading in its terminology because it implies a lack of equity between, or a lack of equalness between the two that is not actually there. It just sort of looks like that from the outside a little bit because one person's way more comfortable being directive and making decisions and moving forward and trying new shit, and the other one's way more comfortable in a following position when that stuff's being done, which, if you're interacting with an ENTP, that's just being done. Thanks for watching Talking with Biz People. I've been host Eric.